Thank you all for joining us today for the webinar, Reducing the Churn, a Winning Recipe for Regional ISPs to Retain Subscribers. And here to present from Bequant is VP of Business Development, Steve Kielley, Director of Customer Experience, Sheldon Lucuen. From VTX1, Director of Network Operations, Glen Norton, and representing Winncom is our very own VP of Engineering, Kyle Barnes. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat and they'll be addressed at the end of the session. Steve, you're up.
All right, thank you very much, Don. All right, well, we put this together. We felt the timing was right. There's a lot of challenges facing our ISPs today, and we talk to a lot of ISPs globally. And with our partners, Winncom, they also service a lot of ISPs and have a lot of solutions out there. And we're all hearing the same sort of message: is that competition is fierce now, with Starlink coming in and having very low pricing, off the shelf products that can be installed by the actual end user. Competition is just a click away. And carriers are also using their excess capacity on their towers to offer fixed wireless access to the home. And they're also bundling, the mobile services with internet services. And that's a pretty attractive package. And then, of course, you have all the government funding that's pouring in. That's with BEAD and RDOF and others, that a lot of fiber is getting pushed into where these incumbent service providers were. So we put this group together today. We've got Glen Norton from VTX1 as our special guest, that he can talk to the exact things that we're talking about, what face his particular ISP in his region. So we can get an end user perspective. We get Winncom's perspective from a distributor with many, many solutions, and Kyle being the VP of engineering. We also have with Sheldon talking to all of our different customers about what they're facing with customer churn and different applications that are sensitive to performance. We've got a great panel together today to talk about these things. So the other thing that we're noticing is that everything is costing more. The cost of operations are going up. The cost of capital is more because of interest rates that are high in today's market, and that drives labor costs up and equipment costs. So, and then customers are increasingly demanding. They're looking for lower costs. If there's a promotional cost, they want that to remain. They are looking at those bundle packages where they're getting multiple different products put together with VoIP services and streaming services and mobility services. And they don't want any contracts. They want free installs. They want to drive down that price in the market. And they expect this service to work. It's like a light switch. They want to turn it on and they want it to work. They don't expect any buffering on their 4K high def streams. They want to be able to put tons of devices on these networks, and they want Wi-Fi coverage everywhere. And these end users are becoming very technical. Gamers and work from the home people know how their networks are supposed to work. They check their ping rates and their speed tests, and if it's not working the way they expect it to work, they're going to reach out to you guys. So we wanted to put this webinar together to give you guys a winning recipe on how we know that you can reduce your churn rates. And that's what we're here to do today. So we're going to have a raffle towards the end. We'll talk about the rules, but this is going to be the first part of a two-part webinar. This is more of the high level, and we're going to have a second webinar that's more a technical deep dive. You'll have to attend both of those webinars in order to participate in the raffle. So Glen, I wanted to ask you, I went through this first slide basically and talked about the competition. Can you talk a little bit about the competition that VTX1 is facing?
Oh man, yeah. We're seeing it on all fronts, to be completely honest with you. Starlink is probably the #1 player right now. I was looking at our disconnect report recently, and they were about 75% of our disconnects, and that's considerable. We've also got other carriers that are building into our areas. Spectrum, Sparklight, Fiberlight, even, although they're not doing as much on the residential side. But we're seeing it from all sides, and it's a little scary when you see the numbers. So.
Operationally, are you seeing the same things that we're hearing from other ISPs with the cost of capital interest rates are high, fuel costs are high. Is that putting a pinch on you guys a bit?
Oh, for sure. We're constantly looking for ways to reduce our expenses and try to keep things competitive. But right now, it seems like it's a race to the bottom. To be completely honest, it's every week there's new promos coming out from some ISP or some competitor that's forcing us to readjust our promos and try to just maintain competitive pricing.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and Starlink is right there with them. With they're pushing for an IPO and they are pushing all kinds of promos right now, free equipment. No get started for $20. For the rest of the month or whatever. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
It's funny how that Starlink used to be, $600, $700 for the equipment, and now it's free.
Hmm.
They're doing a 6-month promo for $30 a month. So
That I don't think it's actually free now. They're charging an equipment fee, but they're giving it away essentially for free. But I think
right.
they're charging $10. I think it's $10 a month.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to compete with, but it's a short-term thing, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Um, so the biggest thing to understand, I think, and we've kind of talked about this as a panel, is that why do customers churn? And I think the entire industry, it's pretty logical, is that it's really a poor broadband experience is why the customers start to look for options. So if you have a decent price and you've got a really good broadband experience and there's no issues with it, then it doesn't give the customers a reason to go look for a different alternative. So if a promotion comes through and it's a lower price, they may look at it because they're looking to save some money. But at the end of the day, if it's not broke, they're not going to take the time to go fix it. So it all starts with that poor broadband experience. If they're having jitter and they're having latency issues, their applications aren't working right, it's going to be really frustrating for them, and they're going to turn around and they're going to start looking for alternatives. And when they start looking and they do see a lower price or something like that, they're going to jump on it. And like we mentioned, it's just a click away. It's not that hard to go out and find Starlink and sign up for it, have it sent to you in the mail, and you set it up.
Hey,
So
Steve. Steve,
yes,
real
sir.
quick, I wanted to jump in. I actually did quite a bit of research on churn.
Uh-huh.
I do want to point out and kind of reiterate what you're saying that based on 2024 to 2025, and I know the landscape has changed quite a bit, but 47% of people actually left their current ISP for a new ISP based on service quality or support issues.
Well,
So
that's
almost half,
that's a
right?
fantastic stat. Yeah.
So, and 38% left for better pricing. So, to your point, if you provide good service, they're not always as likely to switch, right?
Right.
And happy to share the reports. One's from Qualtronics, one's from reviews.org. Happy to share those reports with anyone. So it's really eye opening. Basically, if you can provide good service, you're a lot more likely to keep that customer.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? I mean, we're all busy. Every one of us is running around trying to do all the different things, and you don't have time to just sit there and surf through all the different broadband options. But if you're having problems with your broadband and you can't get your work from home done, or you're
Yep.
having problems relaxing at night because you're having buffering and your kids are pissed about it, at the end of the day, you're going to go and you're going to look for a different provider, and you'll find
Yep.
one.
And it boils down to that one word, experience, right? The customer's experience or
Yep,
their perception, right? So,
exactly. Yep. And so, and then of course, support is everything, right? I mean, you are going to have problems. There's nothing perfect out there. No matter what you do to your network, there's going to be an issue that comes up. And if they hit your support group and they're not able to answer it right away, they're not able to dig down deep into the different flows that you've got going in your network and the different applications that are going across the network and see what the problem is, then of course that customer is going to get the check that, yeah, I probably should find a different ISP. So you're going to have some broadband experience that's going to be poor. You're going to have some cuts, fiber cuts or whatever it might be, and you better have a good quality support group. But at the end of the day, customers aren't buying on speed. They may see speed as an advertisement, gigabit speeds, and they'll say, hey, that's really fast for the right price, and they might buy it. But at the end of the day, they're not buying speed. They're buying a reliable experience. So we hear about this a lot, especially early on. If you had the fastest connection out there, even if you offered 100 meg plans, you usually could win your customers over. But capacity is not everything. We've got over 600 ISPs globally that we manage, and we put their data together, and we can see that the typical residential usage is somewhere between 10 and 30 megabits for their applications that they're using, and this is at peak time. So when you start to think about, well, when is a gigabit speed important? It's, well, when you're doing game downloads of some kind, big game downloads or something, and a speed test. Other than that, your typical residential household is averaging somewhere between 10 and 30 megabits. So speed is not everything. Capacity is not everything. And these tier ones, you can kind of watch the marketing that they're doing. And we're seeing Charter and Comcast and these other big marketing companies coming out saying that ultra low latency and delivering a quality of experience is more important than speed. They're even saying that they want to have latency tests be the new speed tests. So, and when you start thinking about speed and capacity, if it was everything, then fiber to the home wouldn't have any support calls. And we have lots and lots of fiber customers out there, and their support centers still get streaming video buffering calls. They even get speed test calls. And so at the end of the day, it's not capacity, it's something different. And we know what it is. We know that it's buffer bloat. So even if you've got 2 gig speeds to the home, if you've got buffers that are filling up or deep buffers that are storing packets for a long time, you're going to see high latency. And you've got applications out there that are sensitive to that. And when you start seeing high latency, you start having video buffering and things like that, then you've got problems. That's going to cause customers to go look for alternatives to your service. So to back that up, much like you did, Kyle, we went out and we found this Finlay survey, and Finlay USA surveyed 5,000 US consumers. And of those 5,000, 70% of them experienced some sort of problem with the broadband experience, whether it was buffering on video or work from home or just dropouts. 70% experienced some sort of problem.
Yeah, and Steve, to piggyback, I believe I read the same report, and the top 3 reasons. So they asked customers or previous broadband users to explain poor quality, and the top 3 were video freezing, device disconnecting, and slow browsing. Right, yep. The average consumer doesn't know that it's a latency or buffer bloat, right? But those are the symptoms they described on why they switched.
Right. So yeah, and what's really interesting about that, out of this entire survey that really drew me in, was 27% of those were fiber to the home subs. So, again, if capacity was the end all be all, then those people wouldn't have any issues. And so the buffer bloat is real, and there's a lot of talk about it. You see a lot of different QoE competitors of ours out there talking about buffer bloat and how they solve it. And it really truly is the biggest problem that we see in all of the customers that we work with, being the problem. But Glenn, I would like to hear from you as the end user, somebody who is using a QoE. Do you see buffer bloat as a bigger problem than capacity in your network, or are we off?
No, it's definitely buffer bloat. Capacity, like you said, 10, 20, 30 megabits is pretty much all anybody really needs to do most of what you're trying to accomplish at any point on the internet, unless you're, like you said, trying to download a giant game. But having some stability in the streaming that the customers are experiencing is imperative in this day and age. Having something that controls prioritization on their network, be it if it's something with their router or something on your edge like this QoE, that allows for a much better experience for the customer, a lot less buffering, a lot less stuttering on video streams that they're trying to watch, or lag on games they're trying to play. Especially if the system is smart enough to identify what they're trying to do and prioritize that traffic for them.
Right. Yeah, and independent of the access technology, whether there's cable or wireless or, fiber to the home, you've got these in-home Wi-Fi devices, and we all know that they're unpredictable. They're not perfect. Kyle, I don't know if you want to expand on it a little bit. I know you guys do manage Wi-Fi services that you guys sell, and those do help a bit. But still, at the end of the day, you've got all kinds of different, chipsets, Wi-Fi 5, 6, 7 out there. It's hard to just rip and replace all of the different in-home Wi-Fi and replace it all with a managed Wi-Fi solution. And you're going to have different software versions out there as well. So I don't know if you want to.
Absolutely. So, I mean, what Wi-Fi coverage is what I'm going to say majority of people struggle with is the coverage. A lot of ISPs will just put a single AP in because the box says it's good for up to 2,500 square foot. They're thinking it's a 1,700 square foot home. Everything should be fine. But in reality, construction matters. The biggest issue I see with Wi-Fi is really, it has nothing to do with the generation. Wi-Fi 5 is more than capable of achieving a lot of these speeds. The issue is, and it's inherent issue with Wi-Fi, is it's a client-based decision. So one bad update, and now your Wi-Fi 7 doesn't work as well, right? Or your Wi-Fi 6E connections with WPA3 start causing issues. So some of what we're talking about today can't be solved, doesn't solve the Wi-Fi issue, but in-home Wi-Fi performance is absolutely unpredictable, and that's really because it's a client-based decision.
Yeah, and we see interference coming in, where they install a Wi-Fi device and it's on the 5 gigahertz and starts messing with that. And, really they want to put it on the 2.4 gigahertz for an IoT device of some kind, with the Ring doorbells and things. But the end customer really doesn't know what they're doing, and they install that. It connects, and all of a sudden now they've got channel planning and interference. Or the next door neighbor puts in a Wi-Fi router and its own super wide channels and max power, and all of a sudden you had really good Wi-Fi performance and everything was great, and now the speeds are down and you have poor performance. And one of the things that we see that can be mitigated there is just having auto queue management, having something that and for us, we do something very unique in that we know the maximum achievable speed of a device, and we have FQ Coddle that opens up multiple queues, and we can queue those applications. So for this particular Teams meeting or video meeting, we make sure that that's the highest priority regardless of the speed of the connection. Whereas other, you can install Cake or you can install a Coddle on your routers, on some of the routers, and you will have queuing, but it has to reach that maximum speed plan. So if you're on a 500 meg plan, it has to get up to 500 meg before that FQ Coddle or Cake starts to kick in. So you really have no queue management until you hit the max rate plan. And we feel that, that's a big differentiator for us that's really helping in this in-home Wi-Fi performance problems. Sheldon, would you care to comment on that? I know you deal with a lot of our customers. Do you see that when you're talking to customers about our AQM?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, for networks that we're adopting where they may be doing shaping or queuing further south from the core, right? Whether it be at the AP level or at the CPE level. And we put in QoE, we definitely see an improvement on being able to manage those flows. Different traffic types are behaving a lot better because it's being mitigated and it's being addressed at a much higher point in the network with the logic that comes with what their rate plan is, that subscriber IP, and having all that brain power at the core versus at the edge. It allows those decisions to be made much sooner so that by the time it gets downstream to that CPE, it doesn't have to figure it out, right? There's no processing power or resources needed to try to figure out how to mitigate this local issue rather than creating the proper steering network-wide to propagate properly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if the capacity is there, just a couple meg, and the Wi-Fi performance is really bad, your connection is really bad, but you still have a little bit of capacity, and you're on one of these calls, but you're still running another application. With our AQM, this call will be prioritized and it will hang on and you'll have a good positive experience. So I think that's a fantastic solution to that particular problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing that I just to skip over here is that what was really interesting in that Finlay survey is that there's an absolute revenue opportunity as well. Because 38% of the customers that were surveyed, 38% of the 5,000, said they would pay extra if they could have fewer issues. So keep that in mind when you're looking at QoE and the cost of it, is that you can actually raise your prices because you have fewer problems. So this is something that Sheldon has brought up. He works with hundreds of our customers across the globe, actually. Even though he's the director of customer experience here in North America, he's branched out and he's working with other folks across the pond. And he's seeing this trend that I wanted him to speak about because it's really important. When you're thinking about your network and you're trying to build it for the future, it's important to know what applications are coming and how that's going to stress your network in different ways. So Sheldon, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So perfect transition from what you just mentioned, those customers who are willing to pay more for a better service, right? Those are going to be the ideal client profiles that, they're not going to switch due to if it's not broke, they're not going to break it, right? They're not going to switch because a lower price that you're already delivering a reliable service because they have a need for it. Ideally, where we see interactive traffic today, it's becoming more latency driven, right? Everything is becoming more latency driven. We have more people that are working from home. We look at the gaming space, right? Every ISP knows that their most vocal subscriber is likely going to be a gamer, right? If they're experiencing high latency buffering, rubber banding. But that bandwidth usage is actually starting to change as we look towards the end of this year, next year, and I would say a projection over the next 5 years. Is cloud gaming being something that's more introduced into the market. Reason being, as a lot of you may know, some of the console providers like Xbox, they're going to be discontinuing building consoles. I think PlayStation might release one more, the PlayStation 6, but that might be end of lifing right after that. Simply because the cost of hardware, RAM, GPU is very expensive these days, right? And the industry has found out that it's actually less resource intensive to stream a game versus trying to process it locally on a system. So I ran some tests to see what that actual bandwidth utilization actually looks like, right? So we talk about capacity. Capacity is great for downloads, speed tests, things that require a lot of bandwidth at one time. But most of what we see with our average usage being around, 10 to 30 megs is concurrent sessions, right? Concurrent speed. Right now I have a QoE up above me here, and I'm looking at the metrics for this GoToMeeting webinar, and we're probably running about 1.5 meg concurrent, which is pretty consistent with what you would see if you're playing Call of Duty online or any kind of online game, where about 1 to 2 megs is the average. Whereas with cloud gaming, I ran a test with Luna, which is anybody that has, and there's so many platforms out there, right? PlayStation Plus, Xbox Cloud, NVIDIA GeForce Now, so many platforms that are going to the concept of streaming games, similarly to how you would stream a movie on Netflix, a different protocol, but same concept. And the concurrent speed for that is around 30 megabits. Where in most networks, as I mentioned, we typically see 1 to 2 megabits, but now we're going to be at the point where you have to have such a demand for 30 megabits, but maintain that integrity, that low latency experience without interference, right? It's kind of like you're going to a carnival fair and you're playing that water game where you have to shoot the water into the hole. And right when you're about to win, the guy that's attending the game just walks in front of your shot and now you lose, right? Maintaining that integrity of that low latency experience while having that high payload, right? That's 30 times higher than what you would see with the average session for gaming or any kind of teleconferencing VoIP platform. So that's definitely something to note. And moving forward, as these bandwidth needs change, make sure that you're properly planning for that, right? We have some big releases coming out this year, GTA 6. That's going to be a huge demand on a lot of networks just from a download perspective. Everybody, downloading it as soon as it's available, and then, the online interactions. Our director of technical marketing pulled the Liquid Web survey, where we see that 95% of latency issues are pretty much, common. 90% of players experience latency issues. I could I could attest to that myself. I battle with it every day, where I'm always measuring latencies on the games that I'm playing, because it gives you an advantage, right? The lower your latency, the faster reaction you have, and the more competitive advantage you have over the people that you're playing. 72% of those folks rage quit. They get frustrated. They keep dying in the game, and they don't have.
Age quitting.
Yeah. I've been one of those at one point. And then also that 72 would also blame their ISP, right?
Yeah.
And likely, start potentially shopping around, or calling in, hey, my ping is very high. I'm rubber banding all over the place, right? So um, there are also other mechanisms, and this could be likely covered in another session, as to around, those gamers blaming the ISP, and the things that ISPs can do to mitigate, those complaints. And then there's also things that's kind of out of the control of the ISP, but
Yeah.
the goal is really to do the best and build the best framework so that you are resistant to a lot of the unknowns that happens in the internet space, right? The online gaming space. Another client profile would be medical professionals now. So pre-pandemic, the American Medical Association reported that there was about 25% of medical workers were working remote. Post-pandemic, we're at 71%, and that's continuing to grow, right? So they also have a need for latency, high latency, low latency, and high quality of experience, where they're doing virtual WebMDs, or they could be uploading and downloading large files, right? If it's X-rays, MRIs, whatever the case is, right? That reliability of that connection definitely needs to be there. So, as you look at the different client profiles, it's really probably, in my opinion, best to build on those who have a true need for stability. Um, as we continue to go on over the next 2 to 5 years, I anticipate that more people who didn't think they had a heavy reliance on internet will probably become more dependent on those types of high quality interactions. So just wanted to point those things out.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. It kind of reminds me of the streaming video. When there's big global demand on the streaming videos, there's this high demand of bandwidth, and it just crushes networks. And so now you're going to have these other applications coming in with cloud gaming and telemedicine that will also compete, sort of a contention based on applications, which one gets the most bandwidth. And is there going to be enough bandwidth? Well, we talked about it. Capacity is not everything. You'll have buffer bloat after that. And then how do you manage that buffer bloat? So
Yeah. And with Bequant, a lot of our operators will have the advantage to identify and shape, mitigate a lot of those potential inconsistencies too.
yeah. So Glenn, let's switch to you. I know that VTX1 has its own churn reduction recipe, and it kind of starts with your local presence. And we talked about this a little bit pre-webinar. And if you wouldn't mind, just kind of go through your churn reduction recipe for the people that are listening.
Sure. Man, I'm gonna say it all starts with customer service. Being local helps. That is 100%. A feather in any hat of any ISP. If you are the local ISP, that is a foot in everybody's door in that area. We have, as VTX has grown over the years, we've started still trying to keep that local feel of customer service, but as we've expanded from county to county, you're not really local at that point anymore. So you still try to keep keep the mantra and keep the customer service, because nobody wants to be known as the next AT&T,
Right.
So we do things like calling back customers 2 days after an install. just to make sure that they had a good experience with the installation, that the service is still working well, and meeting their expectations of what they're trying to accomplish across it. We also do the same thing with service installs or service calls rather. We give it a couple of days and then we reach back out to the customer and just try to verify that whatever problem they had called in about and reported did get solved for them. Communication is key. There is a fine line to walk between being too communicative and not giving out enough information. And I'm mostly speaking about like maintenance windows, when you're having to do work on the network and things like that. Certainly you want to try to update your customers as often as you can, prior to doing that, instead of just, randomly going and swapping out a switch on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Communicating that information to your customers will solve you a lot of phone calls. We touched on it a little bit earlier talking about churn, but customer education is huge. You have to have techs that are knowledgeable enough to explain things to your customers about your service, to be able to explain and understand, what buffering actually is or what could be causing it is not the easiest thing for some people to understand, but most people just want their service to work. But having a tech that is comfortable and knowledgeable enough that can explain some of the, why they might be experiencing, buffering issues on the TV that's in the back bedroom, can also be a way for upselling and trying to sell. You're solving a problem for the customer. It's not necessarily an upsell, but that's what it ends up being, because the customer needs some additional equipment or additional mesh routers to be able to actually handle what they're trying to do across there. Some of the other things we do are proactive service calls. We monitor all of our radios and fiber deployments. And my tech support staff, one of their weekly duties, they go through and they look at those signal levels. And if they see radios that are very marginal, or that clearly had some issues after a storm or whatever, we put in tickets for those services and roll trucks and try to get them repaired as quickly as possible. Maximizing downtime, efforts to reduce downtime is probably going to be the other major important one I want to chime in on. Having battery backups and generators available at all your tower sites, being prepared before storms, knowing that there's a storm coming, make sure you got gas in the tanks and things ready to roll, because customer downtime is that's the quickest thing to get them out the door. As soon as they can't stream their Netflix or play their games or whatever, I mean, that's giving them the reason to leave. And if you can reduce their reasons to leave, you can reduce churn.
Great. All right. Well, appreciate that. All right. So we do want to hear from our audience. So we do have some poll questions that are prepared. Dawn, are you able to launch those?
Sure. Let's go ahead and put the first one out. What is your experience with QoE software? And we have about 50%. We've evaluated QoE in the past, but it was never implemented.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's lots of opportunity for us. Well, that's a perfect transition, I guess. So some folks don't know, like Glen started with us with QoE as Cambium QoE. And so there's quite a few people, especially in North America, that don't know about Bequant, but they do know about QoE and through Cambium. Just to give some people some history, Cambium had white labeled Bequant's QoE, and Bequant is actually headquartered out of Madrid, Spain. Bequant has been in business since 2009. Previous to that, they had a company called NetSpira that was very successful in QoE and bandwidth optimization. So successful that they ended up selling it to Ericsson. So they had a bit of a cool down period. And then in 2009, they launched Bequant. And we have over 600 plus ISPs today. And I think that number is closer to 700. We probably have to update it. All the problems that we were talking about throughout this webinar, QoE helps. It's not going to solve it 100%. Nothing will. but it helps quite a bit. And just to kind of go through them quickly, when it comes to speed tests, a lot of customers just don't understand that if you have applications running in the background, those speed tests are going to chew up some of that 100 meg plan or whatever the plan is, and they're not going to get their speed test. What do? They call and they say, hey, I'm not getting the speeds that I pay for. And then your customer service reps have to have that uncomfortable explanation of, you're getting the speeds you're paying for. There's just applications in the background that are using that speed as well. And the customer is going to argue back and forth. Well, we actually have a feature that allows, we know what the rate plans are. We're handing those rate plans out and policing those. And because we know what those are, if there's enough capacity in the connection, we'll go ahead and let it burst above the rate plan and take care of those applications that are in the background. And when we do that, the customer gets the speed test that they expect, and all's good, and that reduces support calls into your support center, and it makes for happy customers. We also have bandwidth management techniques that, with some of the streaming applications, or most all of streaming applications, are going to open up flow after flow after flow, and they're going to try and take as much of the capacity of the connection as it can get, just to fill the buffer as fast as it can. Well, what we do is that we identify those applications, and we say that, for instance, we know that Netflix needs a 24 meg stream, or a 24 meg connection to do a 4K high def non-buffering stream. By doing that, we're seeing peak network loads, like we're talking about the entire network, where the peak capacity of that network during peak times is being reduced by 8 to 10%. That reduces congestion in the network. It frees up capacity for you to add other subscribers, and it just makes the network run much, much better. And we've been talking about applications like gaming and voice and work from home. Those applications are extremely sensitive when it comes to latency. And we have our TCPO and our ACM features, as well as our AQM, that decrease latency. And we actually have some results that we're excited to share, that we did a little test on Glen's network, on VTX1's network, and we'll show you those here in the next slide. But we're reducing latency. We're not just telling you what your latency is. When you actually put QoE in the network, it reduces latency, reduces retransmissions, sometimes up to as much as 80%. And we kind of touched on this earlier, where in-home Wi-Fi, you're going to have these issues where sometimes it works great, other times it doesn't, for all the different reasons. And with that AQM and our auto congestion management, our ACM, we're mitigating a lot of those in-home Wi-Fi issues as much as we can. And then, of course, Glen mentioned this being proactive. It's incredibly important in your churn recipe to be proactive. You need to identify your customers that are having issues, and you need to be able to reach out to them and be proactive, not too proactive, as Glen said, but proactive, to where you let them know that, hey, we're aware that you had some high latency, you had a lot of retransmissions last night. We're digging into that, and we want you to have the best possible experience you can. So KPIs and visibility into your network is incredibly important. And we feel like having very granular visibility all the way down to the flow, and being able to use DPI to identify the applications, is incredibly important to that customer service rep. As Glen mentioned, they need to be prepared to be able to talk to the customer and explain what is happening and what is the problem and what are we doing to solve it. So I mentioned it before, we did turn off the optimization in VTX1's network during peak hours for 1 hour. And this is what we saw. So you can see the hump right here in the graph. It's for median latency, mean latency, and even the 80th, 90th percentile latency all spiked up when we turned TCPO ACM off. And then when we turned it back on again, it went back down. So you can see the actual performance enhancements that we're doing with our bandwidth optimization features. So a 38% reduction in latency just by turning on TCPO and ACM is pretty impressive. And Glen, I know that you are on VTX1's network. You use it personally. I was wondering, can you tell the people that are listening what you saw in your network, as the operations manager as well as an end user, when you started using QoE?
Certainly. So QoE actually took a different approach for us. We pushed into using the Bequant QoE as a solution to primarily manage bandwidth for customers. So for the packages we were selling, if we were trying to sell anything over a couple hundred megabits, the queuing system that we were using on our MikroTik routers at the time just really couldn't hack it. It struggled to support bandwidth queues over probably about 250 megs is where we started seeing it really kind of crap out. So we needed a solution that could actually handle larger bandwidth packages, throttling and queuing those speeds for those customers. And we settled on the Cambium slash Bequant solution, and man, I've been very happy with it. It right out of the box, we were able to work with you guys and stand up a VM on our network and get it integrated with our provisioning system and start queuing those packages. I want to say it was within a week of us actually getting that VM loaded up. So it was relatively painless on our side. I know you guys had to go through some initial hurdles with learning the provisioning system and the API for all of that and getting all that synced up. But when I could see it queuing 400 and 500 megabit packages without any of the same issues that I was experiencing, when we were trying to do those same queues on our MikroTik equipment. It was nice. And then to add to some of the features like the auto congestion management, that adds a lot of stability on the network. And so I unfortunately don't have KPIs for how many calls it's reduced, but I guarantee you it has. Just from personal use of it, I can see my latency stays a lot more stable when I'm trying to play games, or when I'm watching the fights on ESPN. It's been a blessing. And then, as far as the experience, like I said, the support side from Bequant has been exceptional. Most of the folks that I originally was working with, I'm still working with. So it's been great to add this to the network and see what it's able to do for our customers. On the support side, I said earlier about education. This is definitely a tool that allows your techs to see more about what's going on with your customer connections. So it gives them a lot of data, both live data that they can look at and historical data to see what customers are doing, what might actually be the real hiccup, causing them problems. And so it's been a very invaluable tool. I would say my tech support uses it every day. They frequently get questions about speeds, or if a customer is having buffering issues or whatever. This is the tool they go to identify what's causing those problems and see what we need to do to help the customers.
Fantastic. Great tool in the tool bag of the churn recipe, right?
For sure.
All right, thanks. Well, so we wanted to, like I said, the goal of the webinar was to leave you with a churn recipe, help you guys reduce your churn. I did look up some of my own stats, and if you have a customer that's paying $50 a month, over the course of 5 years, that's $3,000. And if you lose that customer, that's $3,000. And then in order to win that customer back, there's some stats out there that say it costs between $300 and $500, maybe as much as $800 to win a customer. So you're looking at, if you can save a customer, you're looking at saving yourself, $3,500 to $3,800 per customer. So it's really important to reduce churn. It's not just financial though. It's also operational, reducing these things that happen in your network. That frees up your operations folks to do other things. It frees up your support call queues. So customers who have a problem that, that isn't solvable, that they need to talk to support about, the queues are shorter. So that's a better customer experience. It kind of transcends through all parts of your company. And even psychologically, when you're losing a lot of customers, it just doesn't feel good at work. So if you can reduce your churn, there's a lot of really positive benefits, and we've come up with these action steps. After all of the things that we've talked about, it'll eliminate the reason to churn is the number one thing that we feel is there. Don't give your customers a reason to leave. Identify those silent sufferers with QoE or some other device, type of identifying tool, and reach out to those customers. Be proactive and ask, tell them that what the problem is and that you're going to solve it. And in today's day and age, when you call up a customer support place and you get some AI agent and it puts you in the loop of losing, to be proactive like that, to actually call a customer is going to mean a lot to them. We talked about your localness. For guys the size of ETX1, Glen's right. It's hard to remain local, but they do their best to do that. For the other ISPs that are smaller and local, that's really important. To see your trucks around town, to have you participating in local events and supporting the local sports. That's all going to make them want to stay loyal to you. And then offering win-back programs. When you see these Starlink promos come out, these big tier ones come out with these promo packages, those are only going to last 90 days or 6 months. Take note of when these customers leave, and then have a program to call them back up and say, hey, I know your promo pricing is going to expire next month. I don't know. I don't think that you've had the best. We believe we have a better service than who you switched to, and it was really more about based on price, and we'd like to win you back. Those win-back programs are incredibly effective with the customers that we talk to that offer them. And then, of course, we're big advocates of using QoE to combat buffer bloat and congestion in your network. You just heard from Glen on all the different benefits that QoE has in his network. It's going to do the same for yours. And when you do use a product like QoE, and you can reduce the congestion in your network, you reduce the frame rate utilization on your radios because we're using those bandwidth management techniques, you can offer higher speed rate plans, and you can retain customers that way and improve your ARPU, improve your actual revenue. And your customers will notice this. You heard from Glen, it's snappier gaming, your applications load faster. You don't have any more buffering in your video, and your VoIP and teleconferencing, your work from home applications are smooth. And then, also, assuring your speed test results, cutting down on those support calls. So all of this is a recipe that we've put together for you to reduce the churn in your ISP. Then we have these action steps. These are a leave behind. Anybody who attends will be able to download this presentation. So they'll have this table as a leave behind, what matters, the metrics and actions to develop, and what groups are responsible or the effective groups, and what are the benefits of these action steps. And then finally, we know that it's an investment. QoE is not free. We know that we are a subscription service, just like your service to your customers, and nobody likes to pay subscription services. But if we can show you that there's a payback to that service and that you're actually making more money than you're spending, then we know that you're business people and you're going to move forward with a smart business decision on making an investment that makes you more money than you spend. So we put together this churn calculator. It's available in the solution brief. You'll see the hyperlink to the right, and you can click on that. You can put in your own information on your churn rate, on how many subscribers you have, what your expected churn rate is, and you can actually calculate just how much money you're going to save versus how much you're going to spend on QoE. And finally, we have one more poll question that we want to put out there. So Dawn, if you would, please.
Yes, this one is choose all that apply. All right, 30 seconds has ended. We definitely have a three-way tie of we have a hard time competing with other ISPs. We are expanding our network now or in the future, and we are looking at downsizing, but not necessarily by choice.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Thank you for that. All right, so I did mention the raffle. There's 2 sessions. This was the overall session giving you the recipe. We do have a second webinar that we're going to be doing that's much more technical. We're going to do a deep dive in exactly how our QoE does what it does. You have to attend both sessions, because we want you to hear not just what we can do from customers and at a high level, but also technically what we can do, and have your technical folks listen. They're typically the ones that are going to make the decisions on this. They're a little more skeptical because they want to see how it works. But if the company that's attending today attends the second session, we're offering a 50% off your first QoE subscription, whether it's a monthly, quarterly, or yearly. It's 50% off. And then, of course, we did have to cap it at a $1,500 value. So we'll have more information on the second session. And if everybody can attend, then you'll qualify for the raffle. And that concludes our webinar. We'd open it up for questions and answers at this point.
Don't be shy.
And we have a few questions. Please feel free to add them into the chat, and I will go ahead and read them. Our first one: if we add QoE at our data center edge as a single appliance, will this enable us to determine and manage issues with point-to-point backhaul link degradations or congestion on those links, as well as customer access throughput? Are these different strips in QoE that can be tuned scripts?
Yes. And then Sheldon, I'm going to ask you to answer that after I give the high level answer, if you've got more to add. But absolutely, we can group, you put this in at your data center. That's the best place to put it. We want all traffic to go into the QoE server that comes out, because we do have our TCP optimization feature that requires in traffic to the same traffic going in to come out. It's just the nature of TCP traffic, but we can create groups, and we can group, subscribers to APs. So you can look at sector by sector. You can group APs to towers, so you can see tower by tower, and you can group towers to backhauls, so you can see backhaul. And you can write different, what we call profiles or rules, all the way down to individual subscribers, APs, or backhauls. Everything that you just asked, we can do.
Yep. And especially, excuse me, if you have that data provisioned in an OSS, BSS, or a different system where you house it, the more information that we have, the more we can do with it for tiered grouping, so that we could measure between those two endpoints. So yes, the answer is yes. We do have that visibility. We do also have the ability to shape and optimize different parts of the network separately based on need. So that is available. Good question.
Good answer. Can you explain what some big improvements you have seen in the network performance after deploying QoE?
Sure. We typically see, I mentioned in the webinar, 8 to 10% reduction in the peak network load. So, if you've got a network that's running 10, 11 gig, you'll see 8 to 10% of that, 1 gig reduction in your peak network load. And this is simply because we're using bandwidth management techniques and shaping applications. So we're telling Netflix that you'll get 24 meg, and you're not allowed to take 100 meg just to fill your buffer artificially fast. The same with other streaming applications. The second thing is, and that we saw it with VTX, one is that we'll reduce your latency anywhere from 20% up to 40%. With VTX1, we saw a 38% reduction in latency just by simply turning on TCPO and ACM. And then we usually see a reduction in retransmissions from 40 to 80%. So the way that we're doing that is that we sit in between your local area network or your network and the content servers. And when we sit in between the content servers, we don't let retransmissions get back to the content servers. We store a copy of the packet at the QoE, and then we handle retransmissions locally. By doing that, we're keeping the content servers optimized and delivering packets as fast as they can to the QoE, and we're handling retransmissions on a shorter leg. And we're also using ACM, auto congestion management, and AQM to also reduce buffer bloat, which reduces retransmissions. And you'll get reports from QoE where you can sort by the subscribers that are having the highest latency, congestion, and retransmissions, and you can send it off to your support group. And they can work on those to reduce churn, reduce, and also upsell customers as well. you'll get a report on the customers that are bumping up against their rate plan, which is causing issues. And then finally, with the speed test feature, reducing the peak network load, the frame rate utilization of the radios, all the things that I mentioned, you'll see customer support calls usually drop, 40 to 50%, sometimes higher. I don't know if I got them all, Sheldon, but you want to?
No, you got all of them. I was really going to highlight the support calls. We have so many customers that we've adopted that measure support calls and tickets in so many different ways around performance. And once we get everything configured, dialed in, all the optimizations turned on, they're like, man, the phones just stop ringing. As it's pertaining to performance issues. And there's always going to be things that are anomalies, right? Or things that are have a much deeper root cause that could be hardware related. But the QoE really does highlight a lot of those areas for you to investigate that are, not flow based or anything that is, essentially flow based, right? To maybe adjust radios or upgrade or reboot certain APs or CPE devices. So the visibility on top of the optimization is a mutual value.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Are there logging capabilities for tracking flows to end customers for local law enforcement regulation compliance?
Yes, so we've had a couple customers who were audited. We do capture through our DPI engine all of the active flows. I think we can go up to about 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. There was one case where a subscriber, I guess, was being investigated by the FBI, and they needed Snapchat logs of actual usage to prove that, I guess, that they were using that application at that specific time, and we were able to pull active logs at that specific time that they were looking for via export to validate that. So you could really export via Excel or pull via API a lot of the data that's inherent in QoE today.
Very nice. Let's throw a question to Kyle. Why not just use managed routers?
That's only part of it. So in order to do the QoE and kind of the optimization, the router currently in today's world doesn't have the power to do that.
Yeah, and what we see too with all of our customers is that you can use managed routers, but what ends up happening is that over time you're going to have a different brand of router because you're going to switch. You're going to have different software loads. Like there's a lot that goes into managing your Wi-Fi routers, and like we talked about in the webinar, just because you have managed Wi-Fi doesn't mean that they're not going to have some sort of issue with interference. They're not going to have somebody's going to walk away from the Wi-Fi AP and they're going to get lower signal to noise ratio, lower modulation rates, a lower signal, and they won't have the speeds. But with AQM, that auto queue management, we'll see the applications through our DPI and we'll know that it's this interactive call. And if there's enough capacity left on that connection, we'll make sure that that capacity goes to that application and this call will be successful. So I do think that managed Wi-Fi works, and it answers part of the problem, but QoE answers all the rest of the problem.
How does Bequant perform behind CNAT, CG, NAT? Any concerns or suggestions if implementing a solution?
Yeah, we have a ton of customers who are NATed. We recommend being south of that NAT point so that we see those IPs or what is coming from that NAT point. You could we have one customer who has a NAT deployment at every single tower. So we have to place a QoE at every single tower. Or if you do it at the core, as long as we are in line with that, we have visibility and same shaping controls. Some IPs that are to a much larger subnet, they may be joined, depending if you're using IPv4, IPv6. But we do have a lot of customers who are NATing today. I think it's more specifically on how they're doing the NAT is how we would base the configuration, but I would love to see that use case so that we could, answer that question more technically.
Okay. This one is more geared toward Glen. Has subscriber visibility tools changed the way you support subs?
Absolutely. The more vision you have into the data on both your core network and your subscribers network, the better you can support those customers. When I talked earlier about customer education, being able to see what's happening at the customer's devices, being able to see that their TV in the back room has a horrible signal level to connect back to their local router. That's critical data that allows you to solve that customer's problem very quickly when you have vision to see that. So having a good managed router solution that gives you access to that data is a great solution for that. The QoE side of it allows you to see more what's being affected on the transport side of that network than what's actually happening behind the customer's router.
Okay, well, we are running close in time. I do have just one more question. Have you seen QoE improve your own gaming experience in your house?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I would like to extend a thank you to our panelists and everyone who was able to join us today. You'll receive a follow-up email shortly after this presentation with links to the materials covered along with contact information should you have any additional or follow-up questions.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.